Freddie Mercury performed behind the Iron Curtain when he sang in Hungarian. 80,000 terrified people finally felt free. July 27, 1986. Népstadion, Budapest, Hungary. 80,000 people sat frozen in their seats while Freddie Mercury commanded the stage with everything Queen had to offer. The music was thunderous, the performance flawless, but something was wrong. In every other stadium across the world, crowds jumped, danced, and sang with abandon. But here, behind the Iron Curtain, the massive audience remained rigidly seated, their faces showing both ecstasy and fear. Government officials watched from the wings with arms crossed and expressions that said one wrong move, and this entire experiment would end. Freddie could feel it, the suffocating weight of a system that had taught these people that freedom, even in small doses, came with consequences. Then midway through the concert, Freddie Mercury made a decision that would transform 80,000 lives in a single night. He was about to give them something their government had tried for decades to suppress: the feeling of being completely, dangerously, beautifully free. The year 1986 marked a pivotal moment in Cold War history. The Iron Curtain still divided Europe into two worlds, one free, one controlled. Hungary, while slightly more liberal than other Soviet bloc nations, remained under strict government oversight. Western culture, especially rock music, was viewed with deep suspicion by authorities who saw it as a corrupting influence that could undermine communist ideology. When Queen's management first proposed a concert in Budapest, Hungarian officials were divided. Some saw it as an opportunity to show the world that Hungary was progressive and open. Others feared that allowing a Western rock band to perform could inspire dangerous ideas about freedom and individual expression among young Hungarians who were already restless under communist rule. After months of negotiations, the concert was approved with strict conditions. The audience would be monitored. Any signs of disorder would result in immediate cancellation. Government cultural officials would be present throughout to ensure everything remained appropriate. The message was clear. This concert was happening on the government's terms, not the band's. For the 80,000 Hungarians who managed to secure tickets, the Queen concert represented something almost miraculous. Many had never seen a Western rock band perform live. They had grown up with state-controlled media, limited access to Western music, and the constant understanding that certain forms of self-expression were dangerous. These weren't just music fans. They were people who had lived their entire lives under a system that told them what to think, what to say, and how to behave. A rock concert wasn't just entertainment. It was a glimpse of a world where people could be loud, wild, and free without consequences. But freedom, even temporary freedom, required courage. And courage was something that decades of authoritarian rule had systematically worked to eliminate. When Freddie Mercury arrived in Budapest 3 days before the concert, he immediately sensed the tension. The band was assigned government handlers who accompanied them everywhere. Their hotel rooms were almost certainly monitored. Conversations were carefully controlled. Even simple interactions with Hungarian citizens were discouraged. But Freddie wasn't just observing the political situation. He was observing the people. During a brief, sanctioned walk through Budapest, he watched how Hungarians moved through their city, measured, always aware of who might be watching. He saw the way they looked at him and his bandmates with a mixture of excitement and caution, wanting to approach but afraid of the consequences. That evening, back at the hotel, Freddie spoke with Brian May about what he'd observed. "They're terrified, Brian. Not of us, but of their own reactions. They want to let go, but they've been trained not to." Brian nodded slowly. "What are you thinking?" Freddie was quiet for a moment. "I'm thinking we need to give them permission, not just with our music, but with something that shows them we see them, we respect them, we're not just here to perform at them, but with them." Over the next 2 days, Freddie worked on something he had been planning for weeks, but had kept secret even from his bandmates. With the help of a Hungarian member of their technical crew, he had been learning to sing Tavaszi Szél Vizet Araszt, "The Spring Wind Carries Water," a beloved Hungarian folk song that every person in the country knew from childhood. It wasn't just about learning the words. Freddie studied the pronunciation obsessively, working to eliminate his accent, to sing it the way a Hungarian would sing it. He understood that the gesture would only work if it was perfect. if it showed genuine respect rather than condescending appropriation. The night of the concert arrived with palpable tension. Backstage at Népstadion, government officials gathered in a designated monitoring area where they could watch the performance on screens and, if necessary, shut everything down immediately if the crowd became uncontrollable. Among these officials was Laszlo Kovacs, a deputy minister of culture who had reluctantly approved the concert but remained deeply skeptical. He had seen Western rock concerts on forbidden videotapes smuggled into the country. He knew how audiences behaved, jumping, screaming, losing control. If that happened here, if Hungarian citizens were seen on international cameras behaving with such abandon, it would be a propaganda disaster. As Queen took the stage and launched into their opening number, Laszlo watched the crowd carefully. The music was incredibly loud, Freddie's performance magnetic and powerful. And yet, the audience remained seated, their applause enthusiastic but controlled, their excitement visible but contained. They're scared, Laszlo realized with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. They know they're being watched. Freddie saw it too. From the stage, he could read an audience better than almost anyone in the business. He could see the contrast between what the crowd felt and what they allowed themselves to express. Their faces showed joy, but their bodies remained rigid. Their eyes were alive, but their movements were careful. This wasn't the Queen experience. This wasn't what music was supposed to be. The concert progressed through Queen's greatest hits. Bohemian Rhapsody brought the audience to their feet, but only for the duration of the standing ovation before they carefully sat back down. We Will Rock You had them stomping the one form of participation that seemed permissible, but they remained in their seats, their enthusiasm channeled through the most minimal expression possible. Halfway through the set, Freddie made eye contact with Brian, Roger, and John. He gave them a subtle signal they'd discussed during soundcheck but hadn't fully explained. The band members nodded, understanding that Freddie was about to deviate from the planned set list. "We're going to slow things down for a moment," Freddie told the crowd, his voice carrying clearly through the stadium's sound system. "This next song is very special to us. It's about love, loss, and the things that matter most when everything else is stripped away." The opening notes of Love of My Life began to play. It was one of Queen's most beloved ballads, a song Freddie had written years earlier and had performed countless times. But tonight he was going to perform it differently. As the first verse began, Freddie sang in his usual powerful voice. But when the chorus approached the moment when audiences worldwide would typically sing along, Freddie did something unprecedented. He stopped singing and extended the microphone toward the audience, inviting them to take over. For several seconds there was uncertainty. The crowd knew the song. Many had learned it from bootleg recordings and state radio broadcasts of approved Western music. But singing along would mean drawing attention to themselves, standing out, potentially marking themselves for observation. Then from somewhere in the front rows, a single voice began to sing. Then another, then 10, then 100, then thousands. Freddie stood at the front of the stage, his microphone still extended toward the crowd, his face showing genuine emotion as 80,000 voices filled Népstadion with words about love and heartbreak and the universal human experiences that transcended political systems. In the monitoring room backstage, Laszlo Kovacs watched with his hand halfway to the shutdown button. The crowd was participating, singing freely, expressing themselves in a way that hadn't been approved. But they were also singing about love, about human emotion, about things that even the strictest communist ideology couldn't classify as dangerous. He let them continue. When the song ended and the massive wave of applause finally subsided, Freddie remained at the front of the stage. His heart was racing, his mind working through the decision he was about to make. This was the moment he'd been planning for, the gesture he'd been preparing in secret. He spoke into the microphone, his voice quiet and intimate despite the massive venue. "Thank you, Budapest. Thank you for your voices, for your hearts, for welcoming us to your beautiful city. Thank you, Budapest. I love Hungary very much." The crowd erupted. Hearing Freddie Mercury speak Hungarian, even just those few words, created an instant connection that transcended the performer-audience barrier. These weren't just foreign rock stars performing at Hungarians. This was an artist who cared enough to learn their language, to meet them in their own cultural space. But Freddie wasn't finished. He moved to the piano position stage right and sat down on the bench. The stadium fell silent, 80,000 people leaning forward in anticipation. And then Freddie Mercury began to play Tavaszi Szél vizet Arast. The opening notes were immediately recognizable to every Hungarian in the stadium. This was their song, a folk melody that had been sung in Hungary for generations, that every child learned, that connected them to their cultural heritage in a way that transcended politics. But hearing it played by a British rock star on a piano at a stadium concert created a moment of cognitive dissonance so powerful that the entire crowd seemed to freeze. Then Freddie began to sing, in Hungarian, with near-perfect pronunciation and genuine feeling. Tavaszi Szél vizet Arast, viragom, viragom. The spring wind carries water, my flower, my flower. For several seconds, the crowd remained in shocked silence. Then someone in the front row stood up. Then another, then entire sections of the stadium rose to their feet, and 80,000 Hungarians began singing their folk song together with Freddie Mercury. This time there was no hesitation, no fear, no careful self-monitoring. This was their song, their heritage, being honored by someone they'd been taught to view as representing a dangerous foreign culture. The contradiction dissolved every barrier that had been keeping them controlled all evening. They sang at full voice. They swayed. They put their arms around each other. They cried. In the monitoring room, Laszlo Kovacs felt tears running down his own face. He watched 80,000 of his countrymen experiencing something he'd almost forgotten was possible. Pure, uninhibited joy in their own culture, their own identity, amplified and honored by someone from the West rather than suppressed by their own government. When the song ended, the applause lasted nearly 5 minutes. Freddie stood at the piano, visibly moved, understanding that what had just happened transcended any normal concert experience. This had been a moment of cultural recognition, of shared humanity, of walls coming down even if just for a few minutes. The rest of the concert was transformed. The fear had evaporated. People danced. They sang. They allowed themselves to fully experience the Hungarian freedom that music could provide. Government officials watched but didn't intervene. How could they? The crowd was celebrating Hungarian culture, Hungarian music, Hungarian identity. After the concert ended and Queen left the stage, Freddie sat in the dressing room, exhausted and emotionally overwhelmed. Brian May sat down beside him. "That was extraordinary, Fred. When did you learn that song?" "I've been working on it for weeks," Freddie admitted. "I wanted to give them something, you know? Not just our music, but recognition that their culture matters, that we see them as people, not just as audience members in a place we'll never come back to." "You gave them more than that," Brian said quietly. "You gave them permission to be themselves." That's what they'll remember. And they did remember. In the years that followed, Hungarian fans who had been at that concert spoke about it as a turning point, not just in their relationship with Western music, but in their understanding of themselves. They had been reminded that joy, cultural pride, and freedom of expression were their birthright, not privileges granted by government permission. Laszlo Kovacs, the cultural official who had watched from backstage, wrote in his personal journal that night, "I spent the evening watching for signs of Western corruption, of dangerous ideas infecting our youth. Instead, I witnessed a British rock star honoring Hungarian culture with more respect than our own system shows our people. I don't know what this means for the future, but I know that 80,000 Hungarians felt something tonight they rarely feel, proud, free, and seen." 3 years later, when the Iron Curtain began to fall and Hungary moved toward democracy, many of the young people who had been at that Queen concert were among the activists pushing for change. They weren't motivated by a desire to become Western. They were motivated by the memory of a night when they'd been allowed to be fully themselves, fully Hungarian, fully free, fully human, and had realized they wanted that feeling to be permanent rather than a temporary gift from a visiting rock star. Freddie Mercury never publicly discussed the Hungarian folk song performance in detail. When asked about the Budapest concert in later interviews, he would simply say, "The Hungarian audience was special. They taught me as much as we taught them about what music can do when it's allowed to be what it's meant to be, a language that everybody speaks." but the members of Queen's crew who had been there, the Hungarian staff who had helped Freddie learn the song, they knew the truth. Freddie had spent weeks preparing for a gesture that lasted only a few minutes because he understood something fundamental about human dignity. Freedom isn't just about political systems or economic structures. It's about being seen, being respected, being allowed to celebrate who you are without fear. And music, when performed with genuine respect and cultural humility, can give people a taste of that freedom even in places where it's supposed to be impossible. The baby grand piano that Freddie played that night at Népstadion was later moved to the Hungarian Music Museum, where a small plaque explains its significance. Every year on July 27th, Hungarian Queen fans gather at the museum to sing Tavaszi Szél Vizet Arast together, remembering the night when a British rock star reminded 80,000 people what it felt like to be free. That's Freddie Mercury's real legacy in Hungary, not just the music, but the recognition that every culture deserves respect, that every person deserves the freedom to express joy, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply honoring people's humanity in a system designed to make them forget they have it. July 27th, 1986, Freddie Mercury didn't end the Cold War, but for 80,000 people in Budapest, he gave them something equally valuable, a memory of freedom so powerful they refused to forget it, a moment of recognition so profound they carried it with them through the difficult years that followed, and a gift of respect so genuine that it proved cultures could celebrate each other rather than fear each other. The spring wind carries water, my flower, my flower. And that night it carried something else too, hope, dignity, and the unshakable understanding that music has no borders, freedom cannot be permanently suppressed, and humanity will always find a way to recognize itself across any barrier that politics tries to build.